Hey everyone, welcome. This is Jason Clemmons, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center. And this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We are live right here in the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios on this beautiful Friday evening, February 7th. And we are live on the radio at 98.7 Walk by Faith, 1420 AM. We're on 987radio.com. We're on all of our social media pages. And hey, it's a beautiful Friday in Lubbock, Texas. And trying to get all my stuff here opened up so we can have a good show tonight. So we're going to do something different tonight. Today is today's the 20th anniversary. I can get it to be perfectly right. So we're just going to go with it. Today's the 20th anniversary of me getting my chiropractic license. So we are going to have an anniversary show tonight. We're just going to reflect. We're going to have some fun. We're going to go back and think about the last 20 years that I've had a license, that I've been in practice, taking care of patients. I'm just going to share some ideas and some thoughts, and it's going to be a lighthearted show. It's going to be nice and easy, and we're just going to talk about, life, the last 20 years of life. It's been a lot of fun. It's been inspiring. It's been challenging. And I'm really looking forward to the next 20 years. So that's what we're going to do tonight. I hope all you guys will stick around with us. If you got any questions, send us a text, 806-794-0400. And if you have any social media comments, then send them to us. And so it'll be great. We'll see how it goes. I got a whole list of things we can talk about tonight, but that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because I probably will just talk I'll just probably just talk the whole night. So I got to preface a little bit before we start the 20 years. I need to back up just a little bit because there was some chiropractic that happened before I got my license. And so there was a few years of really foundational things that went along first before I ended up going to chiropractic school and getting my license. So, and a lot of you know this story, but maybe some of these parts of this story I'm going to add to. Maybe you haven't heard before, but I played quarterback here at Tech. I thought I was going to be a college football coach, and that was my life. I coached 3 years at New Mexico State. I coached wide receivers out there. We were number 4 in the nation in passing. And my second year that we were there, we had some good, talented kids, and they played really hard and they did a good job. We weren't very good as a football team, but we were pretty good on offense. And then I got a chance to come back and work with Coach Dykes at Texas Tech in 97, 98, and 99. And was on the defensive staff with John Goodner and Dean Campbell and Dean Slayton and Larry Hofer. Got to work with those guys. David Moody was on that staff. Doyle Parker was on that staff. And so they were a bunch of older guys. They were very professional. They were very easy, like very consistent. Every day just came to work, did their job. Coach Dykes was very consistent. And that's what I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life. I really did. I thought I was going to be a football coach for the rest of my life. And then Coach Dykes retired. And there were some moments in there that I was kind of wondering, it's like, because, I was young. I was 29 years old. I was on his staff. I was in over my head. I was coaching defensive tackles, and I played quarterback. And there were some days that I felt like I was just out of place when I was there. And that's probably what young people think about things. But he retired and I didn't have a job. And my brother-in-law, who was a chiropractor, and he was a high-volume chiropractor. He'd been a chiropractor since, I think he got his license in 1988. And so this is March of 2000. So he'd been in practice for a while. And this is my wife, Leslie. It's her sister, Lori, and that was her husband, Rick. And he had Lone Star Chiropractic right here in Lubbock. And Rick was a very charismatic, very attractive, fun guy, and he had a really booming practice. And I remember getting introduced to him, along the way, and I like getting and watching his stuff, like because I started dating Leslie in 1987, so I just he was in chiropractic school when we started dating, and then we were together all those years. So it just I got to see the progression of how his office was going along, and so he said, "Hey, why don't you come work for me?" And I literally told him, I said, "Dude, you're the weirdest human being I've ever met." I said, "You don't take a Tylenol when you get a headache, and you tell me one leg's longer than the other one, and I just don't understand anything that you say." And then he kind of tricked me. He sat me down. He offered me a job that I couldn't refuse, money wise, but that never did manifest itself, and partly that was my own fault. But it got me into chiropractic. It got me in the office. It got me in there. I didn't have a job, and so I needed a job, and so I went to work for Rick. Well, that was a really big advantage for me. Um, the Maybe the office work was disadvantage for me because I probably spent too many years, or I probably know too much about it. Um, but and it wastes time for me to do office work instead of being a doctor. But the doctoring part of it, the vision part of it, was really cool. We started off, and I went to work in his office, and really the biggest thing that I learned right off the bat was the term subluxation. And you guys have listened to me talk about subluxation before, interference in the nervous system. Well, I got my first adjustment in 1987 when I separated my shoulder in a football game. And we actually, in Roswell, we both got adjusted by the same guy. Rick's first adjustment was by Dr. Payne, and my first adjustment was by Dr. Payne. And we're not going to waste any time in this beautiful anniversary show talking about that guy. But that's where we both got our first adjustment. And and we and so I, from 1987 until March of 2000, I had a definition of chiropractic. I thought chiropractic was this thing where you get, like, if you hurt yourself, then or something, or your back hurts or something, or your shoulder hurts or whatever, you just go in and you get popped and you feel better. Like, that was my definition for basically my entire decade of my 20s. I was a teenager when I was 17 probably, I think, when I got my first adjustment. And from 17 to 29, I had a definition of chiropractic, like a lot of you do. Like, if you're listening to the show, you may have a definition of chiropractic. You may not even understand what chiropractic is. You may come get adjusted and have no idea how to explain what's going on. Someone says, "Why do you go to a chiropractor?" And you just say, I don't know. What's he do?" "Well, he just pops my back and I feel better." Right? I hope not. I hope you guys that watch this show by now have figured out it's a little bit more to it than that. But that's where I was, and I went through that series of time. But the very first, maybe first week or first 2 weeks that I went to work for Rick, we went to a seminar out in Marina Del Rey. It was in Los Angeles somewhere, and we ended up going and eating a sandwich. I remember sitting on the little marina out there. There's a restaurant, and you could go outside and sit out there. And we were at Marina Del Rey eating a sandwich in the middle of the week. And I was like, "Man, this chiropractic deal is is pretty sweet." I was like, I might get used to this. And of course, I was a George Strait fan. So since I was young, since George Strait had showed up, and so being at Marina Del Rey was a big deal for me on that first week. But we got to that seminar, and when we walked in, there were these shirts that said "Got subluxation," like the milk, like the Got Milk shirts. Well, these shirts said "Got subluxation," and then on the back of them they said "Get adjusted." And I turned to Rick and I said, "You didn't invent that word?" And he just busted out laughing. He was like, "No, I didn't invent that word. Um, that that word's been around. That word's been around since 1895, actually, in the chiropractic world." But I never heard of it before. I never like I didn't understand it. I mean, he was the only person that I had ever heard say that word. Not a other. I don't think a single human being in my entire life ever said that word other than Rick. And so I had to learn what it. I learned what it meant. But what was so awesome about that experience is I was in his office and I would see patients come in, and I had this completely wrong perception of what we were doing in there. But I would see patients come in and then they would get better. And then I would just watch. I would run the front desk. I was in charge of all the stuff. I was like his office manager or whatever. But we were having great conversations about chiropractic. We were talking about treatment plans and philosophies. I was trying to bring my coaching background into the chiropractic office, and I was trying to, like when you work for Coach Goodner, it's in your coaching defense at Tech in the late '90s. You're like breaking things down. Like Coach Goodner had a notebook of Texas A&M from 1998, 1997, 1996, 1995, 1994. He just had them all the way across. Like we knew what they were going to do and when they were going to do it. They ran one play in the 3 years that I was there that we were not ready for, and it's sickening to this day. They ran a fake field goal on the first time we stopped them, or maybe it was early in the game. And Dan Campbell, who's the head coach for the Detroit Lions, caught the pass from Shane Leckler, who was the holder on the extra part of the field goal team. He was their punter, and they faked a field goal and they threw a touchdown to Dan Campbell, and they beat us down there in 97, 98. 98. We beat them in 97. We beat them in 99, but they beat us by 7 points. I think it was 22-15, if I remember right. And in 1998, down there, because they faked that field goal. That was the only surprise we had versus the Aggies. They had all the money. They had the best players. They had all the stuff. They had 100,000 seats and all the rest of that stuff. But they didn't have Coach Goodner, and they didn't have the preparation. And so we were, I mean, our starting nickelback was the national goat roping champion. All these guys talking about we need better players around here, and they're getting some good ones. But it was kind of funny because we beat A&M 2 out of 3 years with the national goat roping champion. He was a baller too. He wasn't a very big guy, but he was a good football player. But I took my quarterbacking experience and my defensive coaching experience into chiropractic. And when Rick and I would talk about these treatment plans and what we were trying to accomplish with a patient, and he would tell me this sort of thing, man, I really got into that. Like I thought that was good stuff. And he was doing this technique that he had learned through a group of guys, and it was called chiropractic biophysics. And it was a particular way to analyze the spine through x-rays and x-ray markings and posture measurements, and then create a treatment plan that was specific to the way that particular spine was functioning. And so it was really good to have this foundation to start off with. That was these guys are highly published. Chiropractic biophysics might be one of the biggest research thing in chiropractic. Deed Harrison's the one that started, and Don and his son Deed, and those guys they're really good. And so I got exposed to that, and so I started learning about it. Yeah, there you go. It's about the rest of the story. That's right. That's what you're getting right now. So, but that was a very foundational aspect. It was because it was like, okay, how are you going to evaluate a patient, and what are you going to do to try to help that patient be better? And where is the subluxation, and how do you reduce the subluxation, and then what's your game plan to do that whole thing? And so I think the early stages of my development as a doctor, having gone through 12 years of getting adjusted and not understanding chiropractic, to going into his office and finally understanding what a subluxation is. It's so easy. A subluxation is interference in your nervous system. And if you think about what your nervous system does and how your body functions, I mean, just in order for me to move my hands, I have to have nervous system function in the brain, through the spinal cord, out to the muscles. And that's got to be without any interference. And it's got to be nice and smooth. And if there's any disruption along the way, then that's not going to work. And it wasn't that it wasn't that complicated for me to understand what a subluxation was. It wasn't that complicated. It was like if your brain talks to your heart and you put pressure on the nerve that goes from your brain to your heart and you disrupt the signal, then your heart might not function properly. Like I didn't think that was voodoo. I didn't think it was some sort of cult. I didn't think it was some sort of quackery. I thought it was science, basically. I thought it was neurology. Like when I first time he finally explained it to me, and this is and and the cool thing about it was after 12 years of getting adjusted. For 12 years, I would have had no good definition of chiropractic. And then so I guess when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I think that's kind of what happened with me. It was one of those things. It was like, oh, I get it now. That makes so much sense. It's like, why is my hip hurting? Why is my knee not functioning? Why am I having acid reflux? What is going on with these headaches? It gave me a clear definition of what we were looking for. We were looking for subluxation. We were looking for interference in the nervous system. So the very next question just begs to me, if the subluxation is the problem, the next question is, what causes the subluxation? If we're trying to correct this subluxation, why do people get subluxated? Why do you have interference in your nervous system? And the old timers back in the day of 1895 when chiropractic started, it was toxins, trauma, and autosuggestion. It was what they say nowadays is physical, chemical, and mental emotional stress. It always goes back to that same thing: physical, chemical, and mental emotional stress. We had a friend of ours whose wife died. She from Parkinson's. She's our age. He was 1 year older than us in school, and it was a family friend of Leslie's that she grew up with from the time she was a little girl. And the wife just passed away last night with Parkinson's disease. And Leslie said, "What causes Parkinson's?" And the first thing that jumped into my head when she asked me that question was physical, chemical, and mental emotional stress. There's a subluxation somewhere. There's a disruption in the normal flow of energy flowing, and it's caused from physical, chemical, and mental emotional stress in some form or fashion. And that right there, that one thing was big enough to change my entire life and drive me. That was March of 2000-ish. That's almost 25 years now that since I learned that. I mean, we're coming up on a couple of weeks, and that's 25 years ago. And I can honestly tell you, I've gotten some comments throughout the years. I've even gotten some comments in this last week with people seeing this 20-year thing. They're like, you got to find some other things to get away from this every once in a while, or you're going to get burned out. Well, I can understand that if you work at the school or you work at the bank or you work down at the, if you're coaching football or whatever you're like, if you have a job that's kind of monotonous and maybe it's not all that inspiring or whatever, if you're a thank God it's Friday kind of person, because of the environment that you're in, I can understand that. But the one concept of the subluxation has driven me for 25 years now. And I don't feel like I'm slowing down at all. I'm so excited for the next 20 years and the next 20 years after that. That'll take me to 94. And then I've got that last 20 years that we'll just see what goes on. But that subluxation concept was great. And so I got exposed to some really high-powered doctors. That trip to Los Angeles was with a company that Rick was training with called the Waiting List Practice, WLP, that was run by a guy named CJ Mertz. And Rick was part of a group that would meet together every 2 months. and they would train together. They had guys from Florida and Chicago and Hawaii and North Carolina. They were the whole group of really high-powered doctors. And so I got an opportunity to get exposed to them a little bit, learn what they were doing, kind of train with them a little bit. And then Rick was a big studier. And so he turned me on to this guy named John DeMartini. And John DeMartini is a chiropractor that has turned into a teacher. And John was he's a guy that really inspires me. He taught me a lot. He got me to think deeper. He got me to see things more clearly. And I really love his teachings. And he's the one that taught me about balance and the sine wave and the magnet and the breakthrough experience where you can actually balance your thoughts and emotions. And he's a really smart guy. He does a lot of teaching, and so I got exposed to him, and so I've got this good foundational thing that was going on, and that was kind of where we went. Well, there was a guy that came in. His name was Doug Allen, and Doug had a company over in Littlefield, and it was called Vertical Turbine Specialist (VTS). And he was a very spiritual guy. He came in and became a new patient with my brother-in-law, and in August of 2000, and he immediately saw what we were doing, and he had the concept that from a spiritual standpoint, that when the body gets cut off from the head, the body goes into a state of disorder. We, as the body of Christ, get cut off from Jesus, we go into a state of disorder. And so when Doug came around and he started listening to Rick talk about the subluxation, he immediately said, this is the physical manifestation of a spiritual principle. And he hired us to take care of his entire company over in Littlefield. And that's how our Littlefield office started. And I was right there at the beginning stages of all that. So I went over and helped get that thing set up and painted the walls and laid the tile on the floor, did all the stuff so that we could get the office going over there. Doug gave us a little building and we kind of got started over there. And so now we're going across, over there. We're going to Littlefield. We're working in Lubbock. We're busy as heck. And we go to a seminar in Dallas, a Parker seminar, and it was John DeMartini was speaking. And that morning when I was in the shower, and I had thought about this, I thought about this 3 other times. 3 times during my career, I had thought about either being a chiropractor or being a coach. The very first time was when I was at Eastern New Mexico and I had to declare my major. And I remember exactly where I was. I was in Greyhound Arena. I was about to go talk to my counselor, and I was a freshman. It was the spring of my freshman year at college at Eastern, and I had to decide, are you going to be a chiropractor or are you going to be a coach? And I was standing there in the hallway, and I was thinking to myself, I don't know anything about being a chiropractor. Like, I don't know anything about business. And all of a sudden I had this right hemisphere, right? I didn't know I was having it, but I had this right hemisphere fear of the unknown. And I was familiar with coaching. My dad was a coach. I was in athletics my whole life. I knew how to do that. I didn't know anything about this chiropractic thing. So I just closed that book and I just went in and I said, I'm going to declare I want to get my degree in PE and I want to be a coach. Well, there was another time somewhere along the way. And that third time I actually wrote to Parker College, got the admissions package, opened it up, was standing right in front of the mirror in my bedroom, and I was looking at anatomy and physiology and biochemistry and all of those things, neurology that you had to take. And I looked at myself in the mirror and the fear, I was like, dude, you can't pass those classes. You can't do all that stuff. And I just closed that admissions packet and I put it in the drawer and I just went on. And so I had done that 3 times. Well, finally, when we went to this seminar in Dallas, Rick introduced me to Doctor that morning before I was taking a shower, getting ready to go to the seminar, and I was thinking to myself, you can do this. And then now we're talking about the spring of 2001, and I said to myself, you can do this. And then we went to the seminar, and when Rick introduced me to Dr. DeMartini, he said, "This is my brother-in-law. He's a future chiropractor." And I just turned and I just looked at him and I was like, "Where did that come from?" And Dr. DeMartini said something about, well, it's already written. You might as well, try not to avoid the inevitable or whatever. I don't know, something like that. And we came home, and on the way home, it was like one of those moments that God talks to you, and like he filled the van, and Leslie and I were talking about nutrition for our kids, and he filled the van, and it was like, dude, it's time to go. And all of a sudden, it was like all the fear just went away. Neurology and biochemistry and all that stuff just was no longer scary to me. It was amazing how that happened. And so I came home, and in I think it was May of 2001, I started the process of trying to get all my prerequisites. I had to take 30 hours of science because I had tried to avoid science the whole time I was going through coaching. My exercise and sport science degree. I was like, dude, you're going to coach for the rest of your life. You don't need to take chemistry. And it was like, surprise, surprise. So, hey, we got to take a break. When we get back from the break, we hadn't even got to the 20 years yet, but when we get back from the break, we will start talking about the 20 years. And it's been a lot of fun. So you guys stick around with us. This is the anniversary show, 20 years as a doctor of chiropractic. We'll be right back right after these messages. Yeah, I think it's just important. I think if I'm going to tell my story, I think those early days of the story are super important to the fundamentals of what we do on a daily basis now. We we do a lot of chiropractic biophysics in our office. I'm not certified in chiropractic biophysics because that's a whole process you got to go through. But I've done a lot of study, and we do some of the things. We use a lot of the WLP type model of how to run your office and how to try to keep things organized a little bit. I use a lot of the teachings that Dr. DeMartini taught me way back in those days, and so I think really there's a lot of it that is foundational to what I've been doing every day for 20 years, is through those early days. And so it's been great, really. I mean, there's been a lot of challenging days, but I went to chiropractic school, and let me get past these commercials and we'll just restart right there. So Val, thanks for the text. Yep. And if you guys got anything that you want to talk about, you got any comments or whatever, just send them our way. Send me a text, 806-794-0400. We're just having a reflection show tonight, reflecting back on 20 years of having my chiropractic license. And all that took place from March of 2000. That whole story right there was from March of 2000 until May of 2001. Like all that fundamental, that first whole half of the show, we didn't even get a year taken care of. We'll go faster on the second half of the show. We'll get to chiropractic school. That was great. And before chiropractic school, so I'll tell you this part. So I left Rick's office thinking, oh, well, dude, shoot, I know how to run a chiropractic office. That's easy. Like, I'll just go open up an office in downtown Dallas, and then that's how I'll pay for chiropractic school. I'll just go get me an office started. I'll hire me a doctor, and then we'll just go to work. And I finagled around there and finally got an office. Hang on, let me get us back on the radio there. Okay, everybody, this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, and we are doing a reflection show. 20 years of having a chiropractic license, and I was just telling the social media audience that when I left Lone Star Chiropractic and I decided to go to Parker College, I had to go get my prerequisites, so I did that. I went to junior college in Las Colinas at Northlake College because Parker College had a relationship with Northlake, and you could take some accelerated classes. So I got all that stuff done. I took those 30 hours. I started Parker College, and but before that, in that summer when I was doing all that, I just thought, well, I was like, you know how to run an office, and you don't have to be a licensed chiropractor to own a chiropractic office in the state of Texas. So I'm just going to just open it up an office, and that'll be that. We'll just see a bunch of people. So I went downtown Dallas. I finally, after I went through several buildings, I got the 21st floor of Bryan Tower. They let me have a lease. Those people should be questioned on their judgment. But they let me have a lease, and I hired a guy named Joe Ford, who's a great guy. Love him to death. He's up in Plano. And Joe came down a couple of days a week and we tried to get that started. And we crashed and burned that office so fast. I think I got the lease in August, and we were out of business by December. It was a little harder than I thought. I couldn't get anybody to come in. It was like they didn't want to come. They didn't want to come listen to this. They didn't want to come get adjusted. They were like, "This is weird." I mean, we might have had 10 patients in 4 months or something like that. And so it was kind of weird. I have a competitive streak in me that really wants to go back and do that again. Like I really, if I ever have an opportunity, I'm gonna take that. Going back down there. It's kind of like that fake field goal those Aggies pulled on us. It's like that gummit. Like if we had that over to do again, we'd be ready for that field goal. And that's kind of the way I feel about that office in downtown Dallas. There was 10,000 people that worked within 1 square block of where I was, and I couldn't figure out how to get them in the office. It was crazy. But I think if I did it again, I might have a better shot at it. But I'm not leaving Lubbock, so don't worry about it. But so anyway, I went to chiropractic school, and before I went in, I went and met with the president of the school, and I said, "What can I do? Like, I really want to help, and I really want to make a difference. What can I do while I'm in school to make a difference?" And he said, "Well," he said, the first thing you can do is you can get involved in the student government. Try to run for officer of your class or something, and be in student government." So that's what I did. But when I was there visiting with him, that's when he let me listen to a guy named Patrick Gentempo, who was a chiropractor from New Jersey, because they were doing this thing called clinic camp on campus at Parker College. And so I got to set in and listen to before I even went to chiropractic school, I got to sit in and listen to Patrick Gentempo in clinic camp. I sat in the back of the room, and that's when he talked about the 5P triangle. That's the first time I'd ever heard the 5P triangle was right then. It made total sense to me. Purpose, philosophy, psychology, procedures, and prosperity. And so I had that as another foundational premise of a building block of what I've been doing for the last 20 years was that 5P triangle. And then some of the things that I learned there. So then I got into class, and I became the president of my class. I ran for office. Now I'm older at this point, right? So now we're talking about 2002. So January of 2002 is when I started chiropractic school. And it's at the time, they were on trimesters, and they're still on trimesters at Parker. But so there was, instead of having semesters like they do in normal college, we didn't have a summertime break. So we actually had 3 trimesters. So we just went all year long. School started at 7:15 in the morning. You went till noon in the lectures, and then in the afternoon you had labs, and that lasted from like 1 to 5. And you kind of went through chiropractic school, and you learned all the science stuff early. We were using the same physiology book that my gross anatomy son was using. He was going to medical school down in Houston, and I think I've showed it to you, that Guyton physiology book. We were using the same one. It was the same. We had several professors that were from UT Southwestern there in Dallas. They would go over and teach microbiology over there, and then they'd come to Parker College and teach microbiology to us. They would go over and teach anatomy and come over and teach it to us. So the education was fabulous. I loved Parker College. It was one of the most amazing experiences ever. They did everything they could possibly do to help you be successful, and they're still at it today. But it was great. So I became the president of my class, and then I did that. I got right off the bat, and then I started in. I think after the second year, somewhere along the way, I did that maybe for the first year. And I guess it was in my third trimester that I was still president of my class. And Rick, my brother-in-law, because when I left him, he had to handle that Littlefield office by himself. And then he got sideways with Doug, and they kind of got tired of each other. And I talked to Doug, and I said, hey, what if I took over the office? And then when I come back to Lubbock, I'll take care of Littlefield. And he was like, you think you could do that? And I said, yeah. And so I hired a guy here in town named Scott Howard. And he's a chiropractor here in town and has natural health chiropractic. And I got Scott to come over to Littlefield and see the patients over there twice a week. And I owned the office when I was in Tri-3. So I'd already owned my first office and crashed and burned it. Now I'm in my third trimester of chiropractic school, and I've got the Littlefield office. Okay. Well, so in the process of being the president of my class, I also got to meet we would meet all the time. We got a lot of opportunities that some of the other kids didn't get. And so we would meet with the other presidents of the other classes. And there was a guy named John Hodnett who happened to be 2 years ahead of me in school. So he was, when I started in 1, I think he was in 6. And John was the president of his class. So we met once a month or once a quarter or something. I don't remember exactly what the frequency was, but we were always putting on things and cookouts and doing stuff at school. And so we got an opportunity to know each other. And when I took over the Littlefield office, I asked, one day I was looking at John, and he told me he had moved from Lubbock to go to chiropractic school, and he was a rad tech up at the hospital. And then he went to chiropractic school, and he said he was going to move back. And I said, hey, John, I got a proposal for you. And he said, what's that? I said, I got an office in Littlefield. Why don't you come back to Lubbock and you can run that office until I get out of school, and then I'll take it over and you can go do your own thing. And so John talked to his wife Carrie, and we agreed to do that. And so we started a partnership right there. When he graduated, he just went straight to work in Littlefield, and that was something that we did. So that was while I was in school, so that was probably still 2003. I think he went to work June 2003, and we were together for 6 years with that. We that was a good time. John, I thought it was time for us to separate. We sat down, talked about it. It was great. We both agreed on it because we always had that relationship that if we ever we both felt like that God would take care of us no matter what we were doing. So if there ever was a time we didn't feel like we should be partners, we would just shake hands and not be partners. And that's what we did. And we got it all settled. And then John, he still practices here in town in Lubbock, and got a great family, and he's a good dude. And so, but that's where I met John in the process of all that. And before, I missed a step right here because right before I left to go to chiropractic school, there was a guy that moved here from Artesia, New Mexico. No, he was actually in Hobbs. He's from Artesia, but he moved here from Hobbs, and his name was Tracy Wilson. And he is one of the top chiropractors in the United States, actually. And he's right here in Lubbock. He's got Global Health Chiropractic. And that's where I met Tracy. And while I was working for Rick, Rick broke his leg one day snowboarding up in Ruidoso. And Tracy called the office and said, hey, what are you guys doing? And I said, I don't have any idea. Rick just broke his leg. I don't know what we're going to do. And Tracy, he just said, I'll call you back in a minute. He hung up. He called me back, and he said, I've rearranged my schedule. I'll come over and I'll see your patients twice a week or two. They're like he'd one afternoon and stay the night and then see them the next morning. And He did that for like 12 weeks or something. It was supposed to be 6 to 8 weeks, and it was like 12 weeks of him. He saved our practice. And then when I left to go to chiropractic school, Tracy moved to Lubbock, and Rick and Tracy practiced in the same building. And so I went on, I met John. And then when I got to Tri Six, you get to, when you're in Tri Six, you get assigned a Tri One student to take care of in the clinic. And my very first student that I got to take care of was Joe Fraley from Ruidoso. So Joe had been going to acupuncture school there, right there on the same campus at Parker College. And we had gotten connected with each other. And since Joe was from Ruidoso, we I kind of asked the clinic, and I said, "Hey, would it be all right if Joe was my patient, because we know each other?" And they said, "Sure," and whatever. And so Joe, bless his heart, he was my first. I had two patients. One of them's another chiropractor in Roswell, as a matter of fact. But Joe was what. So that was my first meeting with Joe. And you guys know how much I care about Joe and how much I think of Joe here in the office. He's a great dude, and that's a 20, whatever that is. That's a 22 or 23 year relationship that I got going with him, and that's going to be a lifetime relationship. I know it. So I got to meet Joe at that time, and then went through Parker College. It was great. I got a lot of opportunities. I gave up my president of my class and ended up being the vice president of the student body. And I just had a lot of opportunities to meet people, do behind the scenes things, kind of see how things ran. It was super, and I loved it, and I loved every bit of it. And because of my background with Lone Star Chiropractic and Rick and all that sort of thing, when I got to clinic, it was great. And I loved that year that I was in clinic. You have to have, I think you had to have 50 adjustments to get through student clinic, and I had 150. And I don't remember, it was like you had to have 200 adjustments or something to get through clinic, and I had 365 adjustments. I just loved it. I loved it. I was glad I was there. And then, so I got to do all kinds of stuff, and then graduated. And when let me back up again. I still ain't even gotten to it. I went, we moved back to Lubbock because Jacob was about to start first grade. We moved back to Lubbock in June, the end of June of 2004. And so I still had to finish part of Tri 8, and then I had the entire Tri 9 that I had to finish. And then I had to take my national board tests. I had to finish clinic, I had to take my national board test. And so, and then I was here, well, right about that same. So one of the things that happened was I noticed that, hey, this relationship that I had with John, I'm like, dude, you can't just leave John. You can't just graduate school and then just take over Littlefield and then leave him with nothing. And so we decided to open an office in Lubbock. So we had an office in Lubbock, and we had the office in Littlefield. Well, then by the time I got my license, the Littlefield company had moved to Lubbock. They decided they were going to move. VTS had moved to Lubbock, and they moved in over on East 50th Street and Martin Luther King here in Lubbock in this big complex. And so we put an office inside there. So we had the East 50th office, we had the Lubbock office, because Tracy, I know this is crazy, but Dr. Wilson had decided he didn't want to be in the same building with Rick anymore, so he was going to buy a building. And so John and I moved into half of his building. It was called the Wellness Place. It's on 82nd in Abbeville. And so Tracy and Brett Youngman were on one side of the building, and John and I were on the other side. We had Lubbock Family Chiropractic. Our office in Littlefield was called Littlefield Family Chiropractic. And then we had the office over on East 50th Street. And so the day that I got my chiropractic license, I owned 3 offices. Now, my first office, I already told you about. I crashed and burned that office, and I wasn't very much better at running those 3 offices. And so when you don't know how to run one office and you own 3 offices, you're not much better. So there was a lot of learning going on, and um, and so we were running like crazy, and and so it was 2005, the end of 2005, and then there was a chiropractor here in town named Howard McElroy, and Dr. McElroy calls and he says he didn't call, his stepson called because Dr. McElroy had a stroke. He was in the hospital and they wanted us to buy his practice because we didn't have anything else to do. So John and I saw it. We talked about it. We talked to the McElroys and waited until Dr. McElroy got out of the hospital, and then we ended up with McElroy Chiropractic. So now we got 4 clinics. Like I hadn't even had my license for 2 years, a year. I hadn't even had my license for a full year. I don't think. Maybe it was 2 years. I might be a little fuzzy on those dates of 2006 or 2007, but it was somewhere in those first 2 years. And now we got 4 offices. And we're running like chickens with our head cut off. John's seeing patients in Lubbock and Littlefield, and I'm seeing patients in Lubbock, McElroy, and the VTS office. It was nuts. Finally, we decided for I think the whole year of 2008. I said, look, I'm not going to see patients at the Lubbock office. I'll just see patients at McElroy, which is 50th in Indiana, and then I'll see patients out at VTS. And so that's what I did. Then John got tired of going to Littlefield, and I said, well, what if we just switch? You can see the patients at VTS, and I'll go to Littlefield. And so that was right after July 4th of 2008 is when I started doing that. So I was seeing patients in the McElroy office and then in Littlefield, and John was seeing patients at the wellness place and then over at VTS. So then in 2009, we decided, hey, let's just bring the McElroy office into the wellness place, and then it'll be a little bit easier for us to do. So we did that, moved it down to 3 offices, and then we did it all during 2009. And then 2010, I decided to break up with John, and we both agreed. We went our separate ways. And when we did that, the guy from VTS fired me, Doug Allen. He fired me. So I had this relationship with him from all the way back from August of 2000 to 2010, and then he fired me, and John took over the VTS office, and then I just stayed in Littlefield, and that was fine. That worked out perfect for everybody. And for you guys in Lubbock, if you're not familiar, that's where Ben Edwards at Veritas Medical started, was in that VTS. He just kind of Doug just kind of transitioned what we had started way back with Rick and kind of turned it into Veritas Medical, and then Veritas stayed there for a couple of years until they moved out on their own thing. And so then I went off on my own, and when I was in chiropractic school, I met some really cool dudes. And one of our valedictorians, we had co-valedictorians of our class, became a really good friend of mine. His name is John Conde. He owns the Conde Center for Chiropractic Neurology in Delray Beach, Florida. And you can look him up. He's a good dude, and he's a smart guy, and he's a great family guy. He's got a beautiful family, and he's just a good dude. And so John kind of turned me on a little bit to functional neurology, but I was in a place where it wasn't really. I was married with kids, and I was in school, and I was running all these clinics, and I was doing all this stuff, and I really didn't have the time to make that work. So it was always in the back of my mind. Well, then when I moved off, then there was 2 students that I got introduced to that were coming this way, and it was MJ and Katie Lewis. They weren't married at the time, but or maybe they were. Maybe they were married at the time, but they came and worked for a semester in the office in Lubbock, and they were neurology people. Katie was the valedictorian or salutatorian. I think she was the valedictorian of her class. And they were really big with Dr. Hall. They were really good friends with Dr. Michael Hall, who taught us all the functional neurology stuff that I know today in my office. And so it was fabulous to get to have MJ and Katie there, because now it just got me rejuvenated into functional neurology. I was still doing chiropractic biophysics, and I was still working through that. But now we're talking about 2013-ish, 2011, 12, 13. I think it was 2013 is when they came to the office, maybe. Um, and because that's when we started. July 4th, you know me, July 4th, I decided my mother-in-law had a building in Roswell, and she said, I need to do something with this building. And I said, I know what we could do with it. We could turn it into a chiropractic office. And so from July 4th to the end of the year, I went on the weekends to build that office out because they owned the building. I could do whatever I wanted. And then for the entire year of 2014, I was going to Roswell. And maybe that's when MJ showed up. And then in 15 and 16, they took over the Roswell office and we worked together. And so, and during 2015, we were all trying to decide, hey, what should we study? And they were doing the neurology. Kati was doing the pediatrics. She was getting her diplomate in chiropractic pediatrics. MJ was big in neurology. And so that's when I went to Utah because there's a technique here in Lubbock called AMIT, Advanced Muscle Integration Technique. It's Dr. Craig Bueller out of just out of Salt Lake City, Utah, a little suburb of Salt Lake City. And so I went and I started that in June, I think, of 2015. And then that's an 8-month program. We didn't do one in December because of Christmas. I think we finished in February or March of 2016. So got my certification in AMIT. And during that time, really started working on the functional neurology stuff. And so then MJ and Kati decided to go on their own and do their own thing. And so the Roswell office stopped. In the meantime, we had opened another office in Texaco, New Mexico, where my my cousin lived, and she had a little office. She's got a clothing store there called Rebecca's. So that was another office that we opened, and so but we ended up closing that one when I closed the Roswell office, and we moved to a new location and kind of got settled down a little bit, and then that's when I went to my 30-year chiropractic reunion. So you could kind of understand, it's like I was running so crazy all that time that I didn't have enough skills to be able to do all of that stuff, keep my marriage going, which there was times that I didn't know if that was going to stay together, be a dad, and then still try to figure out how to eat without eating too many carbs. I couldn't spin all those plates at the same time. And what really had the least effort put into it was my diet and exercise. I was doing all of this other stuff, and I just didn't have the why. I didn't have the skill set, whatever it was. I didn't have the focus or the purpose or whatever. So that's when I ended up in 2019 going to my 30-year high school reunion at 283 pounds and seeing pictures of myself and being so embarrassed that we came back and started doing CrossFit. And I just changed the kids were older. I had a smaller office. I didn't have any partners any longer. I was able to kind of focus a little bit better. I didn't have so much to do. And so I could feel it. I could feel the pain of people out there that are going through some of this stuff because I've gone through a lot of this stuff myself, right? And so I finally got it down. We started the CrossFit stuff, and then this building opened up, and it had a place where we could build our own gym. And so because I was doing that in the waiting area of my last one, because I just said, look, it's so important that we're going to do it. And so I don't care if we have to. I tried to get a loan from a bank. The bankers told me I couldn't do it. And within 24 hours, I just got online, got me a loan, got the equipment, but I was keeping it in a massage room in my other office. And that moved us over. And finally, in 2021, we were able to move. We went through COVID in the small office, which was probably great. And then we moved into this building in 2021. And then I ended up down the road going back and getting my functional neurology certification. Not a national certification, but a certification that Dr. Hall put together. And so, and then we have the CrossFit in the office. And then I got to spend some time with Joe, Dr. Fraley, and that added the right eye and the reflex app and some of the things we do with X-ray and the heart sound recorder and the balance plate and the things we do with our nutrition program, and um, and that's where we are today. That's 20 years worth of stuff right there. It's been it's been busy. It's been crazy. It's been fun. But one thing that it is that it's inspiring, and it's just as inspiring today as it has ever been. And we've got a place, we've got a foundation now, and we've got some experience. And I think it's I'm so looking forward to these next 20 years because I really do think we can really help some people. And we've kind of been getting better as we go. And that's just one of the things that happens when you're a doctor. You just sometimes it takes a little while. And so that's what we're doing. I'm excited about the next 20 years. I'm excited about the functional neurology and the curve correction stuff and the nutrition and the exercise and the wellness that we do at the Rock. So um, I hope all you guys enjoyed that. I hope you learned a little bit more about me. And I thank all of you that are patients here at the office. I think all you guys that listen to the show, I really appreciate that. And I look forward to trying to help you have a healthier and well future over the next 20 years. You guys have a great night. We'll be back on Monday. Yeah. Thank you guys for the comments. I appreciate it. Thanks for the text. You guys have a great night. I'm going to celebrate, and Leslie and I are going to go out to dinner. We're going to go to Abuelo's and have some fajitas and stay away from the chips and and enjoy the night tonight. So you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.